Hello and welcome to this edition of the Film4 Review. Today's programme takes on a British theme where we'll start with our feature of Danny Boyle's latest release, 127 Hours. It's the true life story of the live-fast, adrenaline junkie mountaineer, Aaron Ralston. In this tale of human instinct and survival, Ralston finds himself helplessly trapped inside a Utah canyon for 127 hours. Let's take a quick look at the trailer. Boyle's representation of the events act as a showcase for his use of experimental film production methods. These include the use of canted camera angles as well as handheld camera, which all adds to the feeling of claustrophobia within the film. This is Boyle's 9th film as a director, and his first since the Academy Award-winning Slumdog Millionaire in 2008. Boyle continues to demonstrate an ability to push his range and genre, adding to his now expansive catalogue of films. Joining us tonight are Leanne Jones, a member, production manager and liaison officer at the British Youth Film Academy, and John Bradburn, an independent filmmaker, writer and cinematographer, as well as a film production lecturer at Staffordshire University. Welcome to the show, guys. Now, just to start off, we're talking about 127 hours, and for most of the film, we do stay with our lead character, which in this case is played by James Franco. Now, John, as somebody who's worked with directors in your film, with actors in your film as well, do you find that James Franco, lends himself well to this role?
Definitely, he's brilliant. Considering it's a film where we're looking at his face for the greater majority of it, he's quite engrossing.
Fantastic. I mean, this is a film where we spend a lot of time with Franco. He is taking on a true life portrayal of the mountaineer. Now, is it something that you find that actually we take away something from the film by knowing what's going to happen at the end? I mean, John, is that something you find it takes away the tension?
It's an interesting thing because the film is marketed as the film where a man cuts his arm off to get out of a canyon, and so you're always watching it, well I was, going, is this where he's going to cut his arm off? Is this where he's cut his arm off? It's over. Yeah. So it kind of questions the way in which it's made, which is building the drama up to this ultimate sacrifice he's going to have to do.
And Leanne, is it something that you found, as you're watching it, are you constantly, as John says, playing that game with the film and watching it just waiting for that moment, or do you find there's a different response that you had?
I mean, yes, I was always thinking, it's going to be now, isn't it? It's going to be now, especially as there were several times where he attempted it, and I thought, if it's now, it's over, it's a really short film. But what I loved about it was not so much that they drew it out, but the fact that it was so much more than a guy that cuts off his arm. Okay. It was quite beautiful in the way it was made.
So you would say that actually the journey of it and you enjoyed watching that more than you were just waiting for the film to come to its climax? Yeah,
I think it sort of made my mind sort of ease back into following sort of how this character is developing. He's, I mean, he almost has, to say a life-changing episode is kind of a little unfair, because of course it was, but he has an epiphany of his whole characterisation, and he realises he's a bit of a so-and-so and he needs to change it, and I sort of fell in love with that about it, which is really good.
Now, I mean, obviously Franco, we spend a lot of time with him in the film, but we're not really used to seeing him in this kind of role. We've seen him in a lot of diverse things, most high-profile being Harry Osborn in the Spider-Man films, but also comedy characters like Saul Silverman in Pineapple Express. Now, was it difficult, John, do you think, for Franco to translate into a role like this, a lot more gritty, a lot more real, in fact, playing a true-life character?
No, I thought he was very, very good. I think James Franco is one of the most interesting actors working in America. He does a variety.
Very bold statement to make there.
It is, but he does a variety of things, including really bad TV soap operas like General Hospital, where he plays a character with his own name. There's a lot more going on. He's an artist, he writes novels, he's doing a PhD, so you kind of think that at all times he's playing with the idea of playing a real person.
So, I mean, is that something for yourself? You go to the film and you see that within his performance, do you find?
Somewhat to an extent, and it's interesting that even that the character himself is playing himself when he's on the video camera. He's always performing in some extent.
Okay, and obviously, I mean, this isn't the only film that's ever done that. There have been lots of films where we've seen actually one actor taking up a majority of the screen time. An example being 2000, there was Castaway with Tom Hanks. Now, these, in some ways, are very comparable films, but Leanne, with you going to see the film, 127 Hours, did you feel that you might have seen this before in the kind of stranded and trapped environment?
I don't think I did, mainly because, I don't know, Castaway was sold as more of an emotional journey, whereas this was sold, from my point of view, as a guy that's going to hack his arm off. And that did put me off a little bit. I had to be convinced to go and watch it, because I thought it'd be very much a lad's film, and I was really pleasantly surprised that it was so much more than just literally some guy trekking down a canyon and he gets trapped.
Now, as we pointed out, the versatility of Franco's character is matched by Danny Boyle's films themselves. He's seen him in a variety of films recently, going from more smaller films, such as Shallow Grave, Trainspotting and A Life Less Ordinary, to the big budget releases such as 127 Hours, Sunshine and 28 Days Later. Let's just take a moment to look at some of his previous work.
You didn't even have to think about it?
No, and I said, they said, do you want to think about it overnight? And I thought, no, I don't want to think about it overnight. I want to say yes now and I want to do it.
Now, coming back to yourself, John, would you say that having seen a couple, just a refresh of his films, that actually over the course of his career, Danny Boyle's evolved and changed as a director? Or is he bringing something consistent and his own stamp to the film each time?
It's difficult to say there's a specific thing that he does in every film that's the same. I think there's a continual excitement about making films. When you watch all of those clips there, you realise every film is different.
Yes.
And there's something new being tried in each one. You just get a sense of a man who's always excited to be making a film.
So, I mean, but is there anything that really, you know, transcends all of the films and is in there as something that he does with a particular strength?
I suppose you could say that they're all about one man facing insurmountable odds, trying to restart the sun, trying to give up heroin, you know, trying to survive Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, things like that.
Of course, and these are all pretty comparable decisions he has to make. Now, Leanne, is it something that you find that actually you can go to a Danny Boyle film and expect a certain type of film, or do you believe that actually every time you go you're going to see something completely different each time?
From my experience, there's a certain look and feel to his films, like mainly sort of the colorization and the way he manipulates that, not so much in storytelling perhaps, other than his main characters. He seems to be drawn to that, as John said.
Yes.
But yeah, I think just the colour is for me.
So it's the cinematography more than anything else that links the Danny Boyle films together. And would either of you say, really, I mean, John, yourself, would you say that there's anything that, whilst he's gone through all these different genres, something has really stood out as something that he did and, you know, affiliated himself with in a very strong way? Is there only one film or one aspect of the film that really stood out for you in his career?
I think 28 Days Later is amazing for its use of kind of cheap camera technology. You can look at the two Dogma films that he did for TV, which kind of everyone forgets about, but he was there in front of everyone else. And just always trying to find just exciting, interesting solutions to making films.
And Leanne, for yourself, anything that really stands out as Danny Boyle's signature mark there at all?
Not really, it just goes back to the whole feel of the films.
Okay, fantastic. Now moving on, we'd like to talk, obviously, keeping with the British theme, about the UK Film Council and obviously its recent abolition within this country. Now, it's an institution which has been here for a long time, funding independent film. And John, yourself, as an independent filmmaker, do you think that it will make it more difficult for independent filmmakers in this country to get into the industry if there isn't a funding source like the UK Film Council?
It's been taken over by the BFI, so we'll need to see what the BFI's planning scheme is for filmmaking. The Film Council was interesting because it gave certain quite large amounts of money to films that already had a large amount of money. They didn't fund smaller stuff. There's notable exceptions in East Midlands and things like this, but hopefully it goes back to the BFI's model in the 80s where they'd give anything from £200 to £2 million to films, depending on what was needed. So I'm looking forward to seeing what happens.
Looking at those bigger films, the ones you mentioned, things like The King's Speech, they have proven to be big financial successes. and not just financial, but also critical. There's a lot of students who'll talk to you now, and a lot of people coming into the industry who will look at the King's Speech, and that's inspired them. Now, without the Arts Council being there, I understand your point about a broad range, but even without doing what it did specifically, maybe we'll lose that level of inspiration that we had in this country and in this industry.
Well, my argument with that is that if it's government funding, then it should go to something that isn't going to make that amount of money back. If it's going to be a profitable idea, then it's got enough recourse to go out there and find investment in a private sector which will get a great return from it. But if it's public money, it needs to be supporting something that isn't necessarily going to have a wide audience.
Okay. Now, looking into sort of other revenues and other places for people to get started with the industry, as John says, there needs to be a forum for people to do that. Now, Leanne, you work at the BYFA, the British Youth Film Academy, and you take students on. Can you just tell us a little bit about that and a little bit about your latest film, Julius Caesar?
Yeah, I mean, the British Youth Film Academy is aimed to bridge the gap between education and the film industry. So it's hopefully going to turn out some sort of next generation filmmakers. I mean, just looking at Julius Caesar, you can see that the work they do is to a professional standard.
Well, why don't we take a look at the trailer for Julius Caesar, and then we can talk a little bit more about the film. First off, congratulations, Leanne. It's a fantastic film, and I've heard very good things from everybody who's been to see it. So can you give us a little bit of an insight into going into the production of that film, what it was like to work on, if anything really special stood out for you?
Yeah, I think the most special thing about that film for me is that it is made by students. I mean, people that are still in education and just have a raw passion for films. I mean, the people that worked on that were between 14 and 25, and they were the cast and they were the crew. It wasn't a group of people that had been in the industry for God knows how many years operating the camera. It was a 17-year-old boy, or it was a 19-year-old that was booming the whole scenes, and we'd just rotate the cast and crew around. So I mean, that gives them a real sense of pride, and it just makes it so much more fun to work in for me personally, because there's just so much passion. I mean, they'll put in the hours, and then just the reward is just watching it on the big screen.
Fantastic. Now, John, films like The King's Speech, like you said, they're already going to have some funding in place. They're already going to be made. And we've seen that right at the grassroots, there's still going to be films like Julius Caesar being made, which is a fantastic start for a lot of people in the industry. There is the suggestion that a lot of the films that perhaps shouldn't have been made, and these are the words used, that will now not be made because the funding won't be there. Could it actually be a good thing to cut out some of the less successful films from the British industry with the lack of this funding in place?
It's difficult to quantify what is going to be successful and what isn't going to be successful. It's such a speculative industry, so that's really difficult to do. It's not that they shouldn't have been made, it's that you've got other ways of finding the money. We need to, if we're going to think about having a British film industry, it needs to be sustainable. I'd even question what the necessity is for a film council when, if you're making something low budget, you can find a small amount of money and make it survive on its own. The more subsidy you get, the more reliant you get on it.
But, I mean, do you think that that's going to harm the quality, or is it going to improve the quality? I mean, it has to do one of the two, surely.
Hopefully it'll improve the quality. I'm an eternal optimist.
Absolutely.
But unfortunately, we're just going to have to throw it open to market forces, I think.
Now, Leanne, can you see it becoming commonplace for things like the BYFA, other cooperative schemes and other business schemes, private sector funding, to come into the film industry to help us along with this kind of thing?
I mean, probably not with the BYFA as a company.
So we're going to have to cut there. I do apologise. Unfortunately, that's all we've got time for. So next week, if you join us, we'll be looking at Darren Offsey's latest film, Black Swan. Thank you very much to Leanne and to John, and thank you very much for watching. Good night.